I'm joined now by New Hampshire Republican Senator Kelly Ayotte. She is on the Senate Armed Services Committee and is also very upset about the president's comments during this interview. Senator, welcome. Good to have you here today.
Thank you, Martha. Good to be with you.
Tell me a little bit about what really jumped out at you when you were listening to this interview.
Let me tell you what jumped out at me. He said to Bill O'Reilly that within a week, we told everyone it was a terrorist attack. Well, first of all, we know that right away his own Secretary of Defense knew it was a terrorist attack. Yet here we are during the context of an election. Remember the September 12th interview with 60 Minutes where he's expressly asked, you declined to call it an act of terrorism, and he said it's too soon to tell. But what's even worse, Martha, he told Bill that within a week they told everyone it was a terrorist attack. Go look back at his interview with The View on September 13th, which is almost 2 weeks later. He was directly asked whether this was a terrorism attack. And you know what he said? It's still under investigation. So it was almost 2 weeks later, and he was still not calling it a terrorist attack. So this just doesn't pass the smell test when you look at the context of this entire thing. He also talked in Bill's interview about the fact that, security was lax at the consulate. Why then did Susan Rice go on Sunday shows and tell multiple shows that the security at the consulate was significant, it was strong, and it was secure?
Yeah.
You can't tell me that that wasn't said in the context of an election where it didn't fit their narrative what happened there.
You know, I'm curious what you think about these new revelations this morning about Jeff Morrell and the talking points issue, because now there's some indication that he may have been the one that changed these talking points. At one point, he said it was the FBI that changed the talking points, and this is perhaps it is relevant because that appears to have been what was given to Susan Rice when she went out there after all of these so-called, assessments that it was terrorism, and said that it was a video that incited protests that we now know did not exist.
Well, this is really problematic because what I understand is that he received an email the day before that said the day before Susan Rice went on those Sunday shows, that said this is not an escalation of protests. And then we know that the references to Al-Qaeda were removed from the talking points. And then what happens, lo and behold, in the context of an election where the administration is claiming that we've defeated, Al-Qaeda has been decimated, Susan Rice, Al-Qaeda is removed from the talking points. She goes on every Sunday show and talks about blaming this video and says Al-Qaeda has been decimated. So this is really troubling. And the fact that the president subsequently, within a week after, is talking about the video, blaming the video, even though Morrell may have received information the day before that contradicted that.
Yeah.
I mean, you have to look at this in the context of an election because this did not fit their narrative, and that's why this was, in my view, it doesn't pass the smell test that this wasn't a cover-up.
You're definitely right to go back to that timeline, and we have to remember there was so much emphasis on the bin Laden raid, the success of it, the drone strikes, the fact that the president had overseen many, successful attacks on high-ranking levels of Al-Qaeda, and perhaps you're pointing at exactly what the issue was that was underlying that.
And
what do you make
by
of
the way,
Go ahead.
Martha, by the way, I was in that meeting when Susan Rice was with Director Morrell, when he blamed the FBI for changing those talking points. And, then we call the FBI goes crazy and said, we didn't change the talking points. And so you have to wonder, particularly now that we know that he may have received that email the day before, what was going on?
Yeah. No, there were clearly some discussions going on, and thank you for pointing out that you were in that meeting. And we remember it was sort of the Susan Rice's moment to go up and speak to people on the Hill, to you, to Lindsey Graham, to John McCain, and explain what she had been talking about when she went out there in those 5 Sunday appearances. So there is a lot more here, contrary to what the president said to Bill O'Reilly in that interview at the Super Bowl. Senator, thank you very much. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, Martha. Appreciate it. Thanks.
I mean, more to come.